Mr. Speaker, we believe that juries should come from the same socio-economic classes because we think that it is extremely important for the juries to understand fully the gravity of the crime that is actually committed and also the circumstances behind these criminal activities. This is the reason is that we believe that the fairest judgment or fairest decision made in court is something that should be done upon fair amount of consideration, maximum amount of consideration of the circumstances in which these criminals were actually put in. From this reason, we were extremely proud to stand on the side of affirmative. Now, before moving on to the substantive, the model of this debate. Firstly, this happens in all liberal democratic countries, and secondly, the system works like this. So we elect these juries based upon these socioeconomic classes would be judged by tax, for example, tax return, or whether or not this person is receiving income, like for example, welfare system, or for example, maybe like income help and so forth. So these are the criteria they want to judge. And moreover, the context of debate is a country in which the class like hatred or class competition exists, like the United Kingdom is a perfect example that we think. So moving on to our substantive. So basically two issues talked about in this debate. Firstly, why juries by one's peer is an extremely important principle, and secondly, why under the status quo there is an unfair judgment made by the juries, and why after taking to disposal that kind of problem is going to be solved. So talking about the first point, well, we think that the juries should come from the closest people who come from should come from the circumstance, the classes which is the closest to the defendants themselves. Why is that? Because firstly, we think that these people who are the peers of the defendant are the ones who can best understand the gravity of the crime that is actually committed, and also the circumstances in which these criminals were actually put in, right, Mr. Speaker? Because they are the ones who share the living space and so forth. And moreover, we think that the second reason is because we think that fairest judgment is, as I said in the introduction, is a judgment that is made based upon like a considerate amount of like contemplation and understanding about the criminals' like background and so forth. So we think that the people who understand the most and the best about these like criminals or defendants should be the one to actually be the juries. And moreover, we think that this is okay. So this is the reason why, for the example, in the United States, for example, the juries are selected from the county or from the town in which these suspects actually come from, right, Mr. Speaker? This is like clear analogy of this principle. So why is this principle applicable to this case? Because we think that particularly socioeconomic classes do matter a lot in the criminal justice system and in the court itself. Why is that? Because we think that a lot of motives of these kind of criminal activities come from monetary incentive, right, Mr. Speaker? If you are a rich person who are in a very high social status, in that case, this person, for example, are likely to commit embezzlement, and this kind of system of embezzlement is best understood by the people who are coming from the same like classes. And moreover, poor people who commit crime mostly because of the, for example, lack of money, and they do robbery and so forth. And only the poor people who come from the same classes do understand this kind of monetary incentive, and therefore we think, and circumstances, therefore we think that socioeconomic as a particular matter in this kind of principle. So moving on to the second issue, the status quo problem. We think that under the status quo, okay, unfair judgment is made. Why is that? Because we think that under the status quo, the system goes like this. So firstly, the juries tend to come from like people who are like from intelligent classes or, for example, rich classes. Why is that? Because under the status quo, jury takes a lot of time. That means that juries, if you compare juries who have to work every day for their living, the juries who are like free, maybe like housewives or, for example, retired people, these people tend to be preferred than the former types of jury. And moreover, within the jury system, what you do is like you have discussion before like making decisions, right? In that case, these like people, for example, intelligent people, also people with sophisticated knowledge, tend to be advantageous. They tend to have the like rhetorics or legal knowledge. Therefore, they can easily persuade, like for example, the poor people or the people from other classes. Therefore, there's like a power imbalance occurring in this kind of jury system. And what is happening? So this leads to two consequences. Firstly, biased judgment towards the poor people. Why is that? Because in the context, like the UK, these like, for example, rich people or sophisticated people tend to live far away, or they do not really interact with these kind of poor people, right? So they don't understand how severe like it is to live in a very like labor class community, how like it is severe to like have lack of money, right, Mr. Speaker? And moreover, because they tend to like hate them or disregard them, right? They don't even like go to the same school that in the, for example, United Kingdom, like since primary school you go to a different rich people go to a different school from poor people, right? And in that cases, they, for example, tend to have a bias that if you have like tattoo and if you're like attacked and if you're like really wear like dirty clothes, these people like tend to have the prejudiced people that these people have a tendency to commit crime because they have this kind of bias. And therefore, even if these criminals, even these suspects haven't committed that much serious crime, or even if there's like a lot of room for circumstances, these juries tend to choose the higher, for example, punishment, higher conviction of punishment. For example, if there's felony and battery and misdemeanor, in these cases, these rich people tend to, for example, convict these poor people of the felony rather than battery, Mr. Speaker. This is the situation that is occurring under the status quo. So even if these people try their best to not to have the bias, what's going to happen is that because they don't understand like how severe it is to live in that kind of community, they don't have the full understanding. Yes?
Yeah, we agree on the importance of fair judgment, but fair judgment should be done not only for the suspect, but also the victim as well, Mr. Manati.
I think especially in the case of the victim, because when it comes as a victim, most of the people try to understand it because they regard them as a victim who are extremely poor, who are extremely under a very tragic situation. People have sympathy towards victims. We think that defendants tend to be a disadvantage on this point. So moving on to afterplan. Afterplan, taking the proposal, what's going to happen is that the juries are from the same socio-economic classes. That means that these poor people are going to be juried by these poor class people, right? In this case, these people do not have any bias toward these kind of poor people. They don't like automatically give higher punishment because of just wearing tattoos or because of having dirty clothes. Therefore, bias judgment is not going to occur, and moreover, they're going to have full consideration about these kind of circumstances in which they were placed. And moreover, especially because these poor people's crimes are even victims of the poor crimes committed by the poor tend to be come from the same community. So we don't think that over sympathy won't happen, right? Poor people, even the poor people don't like criminals. They don't like robbery and so forth. They don't like social disorder, right? In that case, we think that if these crimes are extremely serious, in that case, even the poor people, even if they are from the same socio-economic classes, they don't have over sympathy. They will judge objectively, which is going to achieve the goal that we want to propose here. Thank you.
Okay, so the defendants are not the only people who exist inside a court. Victims also exist inside a court. When we consider those situations fundamentally, when we consider the protection of the functionality of the criminal justice system, the more assurable social security by keeping the diversity of the juries which exist inside our court should be the stance, the framework which we're going to support from today's opposition. Today's proposition is so sided defendants who are only came with similar situation satisfied with that to oppose. On that basis, two issues in my speech. First of all, we talk about why this policy fundamentally contradicts the role of the juries in the first place. Second, we talk about the consequence of this policy, how this policy will not more likely to crack down social security by taking this proposal. But pull out several rebels. The only contention coming to the proposition is, somehow unfair punishment is done by the current system. Two responses. First of all, if the balance of the number of the jury is so problematic, we're more happy to maximize the diversity of the juries as much as possible under our policy. Rather than making justified defendants under their product. Second response, even in the status quo, fair judgment with regards to those defendants is already done the status quo. Because in the status quo, juries are composed of white people, white juries, black juries, Latin juries, or so and so, which is composed of not balanced numbers of the juries, which comes from a lot of diverse background, meaning that the juries are just making a judgment based on the evidence, based on the past reflection of the past incident, by using public lawyer who are more fairly can be judged in the status quo. But if we are taking the proposal, rather than destroy the balance of that court in the first place. Why is that? Because please take a usual case in the United States court. Because, for example, in usual trial, there are 3 judges and 6 juries. In the status quo, juries are composed of 3 neutral maybe, and 3 biased person in the first place. But even in the status quo, 6 persons are neutral because all 3 judges are neutral and 3 persons are neutral in the status quo. But if we're going to take the proposal, all 6 juries will going to be side with the defendants, not be neutral. That means neutral person, we're going to be overwhelming majority, we're going to decide the punishment, which can rather distort the criminal justice system, which I'm going to further explain in my argument. So let me just move on to the points of the first argument. So what is fundamentally the role of the jury, the status quo, is to introduce civic view inside the court to revise the defects of the court as much as possible. Because judges' background is limited, is not always perfect. We have to introduce as much civic views because if the three judges are all composed of a man, well, they cannot purely sympathize with the case of rape incidents, or so on and so forth. That is why we need a necessity of women's juries, or so on and so forth. In order to maximize proportionality of punishment as much as possible. That is why what we want to say from the role of the jury is collectives of the juries overall should be kept as neutral as much as possible. That is why, for example, in the United States jury are in many trials composed of white people, black people, Latin people, etc. So for the proportionate judgment, for having adequate rehabilitation for the criminals, or so on and so forth. That is why the role of jury should be kept diverse. But this policy will not simply distort the fairness of the role of the jury for two reasons. First of all, the person who came from similar status will going to have more possibility to be sympathized with those situations. For example, if you're a poor black, if the defendant is a poor black person and he committed stealing, well, those black, the jury who came from the poor black people background, we're going to be likely to most sympathize with the situation, the reason why he committed crime. Because I can know he committed stealing because poverty was very inevitable. Robbery was very necessary for the sustainability of his life, or so on and so forth. That is why the sympathization with the possibility of the crime were going to be severely increased under their product. But secondly speaker, we have to consider the conviction or the judgment done by those court directly leads to stigmatization of the entire community in that sense. How do we mean by this? Because for example, conviction will going to be further likely to be focused by the media and society. If black person commits some murder and punished very heavily, what white people, other people exist externally outside the community, we're going to be simply think black community is very dangerous thing. We have to isolate from that society as much as possible, which kind totally going to stigmatize those kind of community as much as possible. So when we consider those situations, black people, the poor black people, have strong incentive to lighten the punishment of that black person in order to escape from stigmatization, which is going to be happen for the external society. Such as, let me speak of, fundamentally this policy contradicts to the role of the jury, I guess.
Okay, should we put racists on the jury to most aptly represent the diversity of our country? In other words, because there are racists, do we need racists on the jury?
First of all, racist is totally not, isolated or accused by society. Government has no incentive to hire racists in the first place because it contradicts the Constitution in the first place. That is not a relevant case. Moving on to the consequence of this policy. As I've already told you, from those two logics, the sympathization and escaping from stigmatization, well, possibility by cracking down social security, we're going to be massively increased. Well, because what we're going to happen, the situation we can simply imagine from taking this policy is, the jury coming from similar background, we're likely to sentence more likely of the punishment of those defendants. So two impacts from that fact. First of all, principally it contradicts the purpose of the criminal justice system. Because current criminal justice system is actually posing a punishment which is based on the consideration of the intention or action of that defendant. How? To protect society, to rehabilitate that person adequately, to isolate that person from an adequate term. But second of all, in terms of practical impact, we're going to be simply endanger society much more. Because defendant who has propensity to kill others and needs 20 years of rehabilitation, we're going to be lighten their punishment. He can be escaped from the rehabilitation 10 years earlier, so he's going to be released society without fulfilling rehabilitation, which is going to possibly more endanger society ultimately. So, Mr. Speaker, considering social security and functionality of the criminal justice system, we're immensely proud of us.
So all of all of their arguments only stand if we assume that a lesser punishment is not proportional. What we say is in these cases, a lesser punishment is more proportional because of a systematic bias in the system. All of his things that he said was like, oh, they'll go to jail for less time, they'll be out sooner. What we're saying is good because they didn't deserve to be in there in the first place because of a systematic bias by the rich against the poor, and in other cases, a systematic bias of the poor against the rich in the case of revenge convictions because they feel resentment and things like that. Okay? But now some points of rebuttal. Okay? First of all, we say, like, they said we need juries that are completely representative of, like, the electorate or the people, right? That assumes that, like, oh, so we need racists on the jury. Oh, we need sexists on the jury. Oh, we need, like, they didn't show us why that will lead to more proportional punishment. All they said was, like, we should do it because otherwise the victims will be sad or something. They didn't show why that will actually lead to more proportional punishment and more just punishment. All they did was assert this principle. But what we say is if there are people who make justice worse by being on that jury, they should not be on that jury regardless of who happens to live in your country. Okay? Then they try to tell us that the reason why these convictions won't be proportionate is because these groups sympathize with people from their own groups. No. No one hates crime more than black people who live in the ghetto where there's shootings every night. No one hates crime more than poor people who live in societies where daily they are victimized by muggings, by robberies, and by break-ins. Likewise, no one hates financial crime more than rich white people because they're the ones who lose out. So in both these cases, these people are far more likely to be objective and weigh up the actual circumstances of the crime, right? No black person wants to send like an innocent black person to jail, but a black person does want to send a criminal to jail because they're the people destroying their communities. They're the people endangering their children, right? Okay? Then they tried to bring us this point about stigmatization, right? They said, oh, well, black people don't want their communities to be stigmatized, so they'll let black people off the hook, right? What we say is, if that black person was convicted by black people, now all the white people say that black people like justice too, that black people hate criminals too, and black people are just as against crime, just as against criminals as white people are, right? Or likewise, that poor people are just as against crime, just as against those sorts of endangerments as the rich, right? So we think there's incredible symbolic value to having a poor person convicted by a poor person, having a black person convicted by a black person, and black people will recognize this, right? They'll know that they're sending a signal to society that they care about justice just as much as anyone else, that they want to punish criminals just as much as anyone else. But what am I going to bring you in my substantive today? I'm going to bring you that passing this policy will actually lead to better arguments in courts, better deliberation in courts, and will lead to true, meaningful, just convictions, not convictions of expedience, right? What do I mean by this, right? I say in the status quo, prosecutors want to convict criminals, and they'll do that by any means possible. Usually jurists are very biased. For this reason, prosecutors resort to arguments that will appeal to those biased jurists, right? So prosecutors tend to rely on circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors tend to rely on arguments that will appeal to the bias of the jury because their job is to get a conviction, right? But once we have a policy where this systematic bias doesn't exist, prosecutors won't be able to use those biased arguments anymore. Prosecutors won't be able to use the sorts of arguments like, this crime was committed by a person in a hoodie with a tattoo on his arm. This man has a hoodie and a tattoo on his arm. He was near the crime scene, therefore he must be guilty. And the all-rich jury goes, yeah, he must be guilty because he's exactly the kind of person who commits a crime, right? What this means is that prosecutors will have to rely on forensic evidence. Will have to rely on truly convincing evidence because this systematic bias won't exist in the court, right? What this means is that when people are convicted, they will be meaningfully convicted, right? We think even if that person was guilty, his conviction based on a bias makes that conviction not truly just, right? Even if we send him to jail, we didn't send him to jail in a truly meaningful way, in a way that supports the principles of the criminal justice system. But when we send them to jail based on evidence that is convicting, that is convincing and true, then we have truly convicted them, and we're upholding the principles of the criminal justice system to begin with, right? Moreover, we think this will prevent prosecutors from bringing cases against people who may or may not be guilty. We think that prosecutors have this pressure to convict as many people as possible, right? Their performance is based on their conviction rates. When they are going to be reappointed, people look at, how many people did you convict? How many people did you send to jail? Are you really doing your job, right? That means prosecutors tend to push cases even when the forensic evidence is not true because they know they can get a conviction based on this bias, based on appealing to the biases of the jury. But in the after plan, they won't bring these cases, right? They will only bring these cases when they have convincing forensic evidence, because only then will they be able to win. That means we don't have specious prosecution of people who may or may not be guilty, and that means we don't have people going to jail who may or may not have been guilty, and when they go to jail, they will have been convicted in a meaningful sense, and they'll be convicted in a real sense, the one that we can be proud of. Yes?
Your fundamental assumption is all juries are biased in the status quo. It's no, more than that.
Well,
they're the judges who have very neutral stance.
Oh my
other than
God!
judges.
When you're a judge who went to Eton and then to Oxford, like where I went and I knew these people, you don't like poor people. Poor person, you wear bow ties and red pants and ride around on a little bicycle. Right? And then you go study and you become a barrister. These people aren't neutral, right? These people don't trust the poor. They've never met a poor person in their entire life. So your assertion that just because we have judges, we're going to get proportional justice is ridiculous, right? It's surface ridiculous, all right? So what have we brought you today? First of all, we've rejected their arguments, right? We've shown you how, like, just a representative jury doesn't mean to get proportionate justice, which is the true aim of this debate. The only thing that can get proportionate justice is juries who understand the crime, understand the criminal, and have an incentive to be objective, right? People with bias do not have an incentive to be objective, and therefore will not give out proportionate justice. Moreover, we've shown you that the sympathy point isn't really there, because black people hate crime so much. It's what affects them the most. Likewise, poor people hate crime so much because of what affects and destroys their communities. Moreover, we think people can send a strong message by convicting someone from their community, because it means we hate crime too. We're against this too, just like you. And then it'll change the way these people are treated in society at large. And then we brought you arguments how this will lead to better arguments in court and more honest prosecution, because you won't be able to rely on biased arguments anymore. You'll have to rely on forensic evidence, and you'll have to convict them based on irrefutable evidence that you can display in court and that you can argue them in court. And this means we won't have specious prosecution, right? We won't have prosecution against people who we don't really know if they're guilty or not, but we just want to convict them for the numbers. It means we will prosecute people who we know are guilty, and we think that we should only convict people who we know are guilty, because anything else is a violation of justice. We are very proud to promote that.
I was seriously afraid of Mr. Thomas because he keeps shouting near my ear. But I managed to gather enough rationality to find out that all the arguments are bullshit, and we should The first thing from the government side is that they try to pull out the similarity between these, people of the same socio-economic class with the fact that the juries are selected from a specific county in the status quo. Now, Mr. Speaker, the problem with the people who are selected from a specific county is that they do not have a bias for or against the defendant, nor they have the bias for or against the victim. That is the status quo, which is why we select a group of people from this certain particular place as a jury. They know, they understand the situation of the crime, but they don't have any bias against the defendant or for the defendant, against the jury or for the jury, or for the victim, right? Second thing they say is that, they need to understand the gravity, the circumstances of crime. Yes, we agree, but that is the crime. Now, what they're proposing is that we should understand the circumstances of the defendant. No, we do not believe that in every single case we should sympathize with the defendant. The fact is that there are suspected criminals who might or might not have committed some atrocity against the society, which is why, yes, although we need full understanding of the crime, and that is what the job of the prosecution and the defendants is, we do not need to always sympathize with the defendant. That is the point, and that is what is going to be destroyed in the after plan. Third argument coming from the deputy, right? He talk about how the black people are not going to be the ones who hate the black criminals the most, in response to Mr. Shimizu's points about how there's going to be light punishment. Mr. Speaker, we don't care because this is a contradiction. What they're saying basically is that because the black people hate the reputation is going to be tarnished by the black criminals, they're going to punish them harsher. This is, in fact, a bias against the defendants, and it is, again, not a good thing. You see, what they're saying is that they contradict themselves, right? They say that, no, if they do not deserve their punishment, they deserve light punishment, and now they propose a model and a situation where the punishment can even get heavier in the first place, right? But in our case, we are always neutral because we try to collect the diversity in the judges, in the juries. We try to maintain the ability, the possibility that everybody is going to be judged fairly, not against that biased against or not biased for. That is the beauty of the status quo in the first place. So this contradiction, we ask them to resolve it in the government way. Finally, they talk about how the prosecution will stop bringing these cases that is not definite and so on, right? No, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the thing is that prosecution needs to bring the cases to the court anyway, because a crime happens. There's a possibility that a crime happens. There's a possibility that somebody should get convicted, which is why prosecution occurs. Which is why, even if there's a slight possibility that a crime has occurred, the prosecution happens. justice, which is why we should actually deter people from prosecuting, right? Not that we understand how they are going to deter people from prosecuting anyway, because the prosecutors do the job and then the juries make the verdict guilty or not guilty. We do not see how it's going to deter any sort of like a false prosecution they're mentioning, right? But in either case, we see that all these arguments from the government bench have been shown as bullshit, right? Now I'm going to talk to you about my extension. There are 3 extensions coming from Deputy Leader of Opposition, and I assure you they are all not bullshits, right? The first thing from the Deputy Leader of wait, stop. I'm going to, start to by examining the Leader of Opposition's points, right? The Leader of Opposition has mentioned to you about how this, there's going to be an imbalance between juries and so on, right? The government chose to ignore this point because they believe that, if it is lighter, then it's fine because it's public proportionate. No, we don't think so, because we argued that, and the Leader of Opposition, that juries are the ones that serve the society because they're summoned to be the agents of justice. No response coming from the government about how these juries, mission, maybe damaged by this point, right? Now I'm going to extend upon this point by telling you how likely there is going to be a biased judgment by starting my first extension, peer pressure. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about juries from the same socio-economic class, especially from the same community too, as we have established in the status quo, right? When we talk about this, there's a high likeliness that there's going to be a peer pressure among the juries, oh, he came from the same background as me. The defendant and the juries, they were all the same. We are brothers, we are like, good bros. And that ultimately means that if there's a certain crime that is committed by this defendant, regardless or not whether this person is guilty, or regardless or not whether you think that as a jury, whether you think that this person is guilty or not, you're more likely to think, what would the other think? What would the others think? What would the other juries do? Because they belong to the same socio-economic class. Perhaps they would like to lighten punishment. If I don't do that, I'll be the odd one out. I'll be the person who is like, out of the, the community. Which is why there's more likely to be a peer pressure after the plan, where people will try to vote for the same decision as the previous people, as the other people, which shows how biased it can be after the plan, right? Now we're assuring you that in the status quo, what we are collecting as juries are people who are educated and reasonable, rational. We are of course not going to, just gather some random sort of people, obviously. But the main criteria here is not only the reasonable and educated, but also the diversity in the first place, because that assures the people, the juries, that they are not going to be, biased. Right? Second extension, no thank you. Second extension, I'm going to explain about the power of the media in the first place, right? Mr. Shimizu actually pointed out this a little bit about the, the profiling of a certain group and so on, and I think Mr. Thomas actually agrees that there's such a thing happening. Now, my mentioning is that after the plan, it becomes impossible for another person from another socio-economic background to actually enter or participate in the jury's activity inside a certain trial which concerns a certain person from other socio-economic class. What this means is that if you, a rich person from Oxford, for example, has a certain bias against us red sweater wearing poor people, I don't know whatever, then you'll never be able to watch that in live and judge, weigh the issues and try to understand it in court, because you'll never be summoned as a jury. Now the thing is that even though you may see those issues in the media may be biased in the first place, especially if they're run by, hopefully not, those people of England who are so biased against these people, right? So I believe that the only way how we're going to tackle this social problem about how people are misunderstanding against this certain group of people is by allowing them or giving them the chance or possibility to actually participate in the trial of those people who belong to a different socio-economic class, so that they can better understand, like what they say, understand the circumstances of the crime, which is the goal, right? So I believe that it benefits much more to the society if we actually allow other people from other student class to be the juries, right? But my third argument, and finally, is because it's the backlash. Regardless or not whether they think the peer pressure will happen and the bias vote will happen, regardless or not whether they think this problem of prejudice will be solved or not, there's a possibility that because the image of criminal justice will become somebody being judged by their own kind and the likeliness of the of the biased judgment, it causes people to distrust the criminal system in the first place. There's going to be huge backlash. I mean, come on, you, I don't know, a rich person watching TV, right? You watch somebody getting acquitted, you watch somebody getting declared innocent. In the status quo, you probably think, okay, that must be a due process of law. After the plan, you might think that, oh, okay, so the juries must have been really close with this guy, right? This is the kind of thing that shows the unfairness after the plan. Because after the plan, even if it doesn't really happen, you will have that perception because you understand that in the criminal justice system, nobody is going to be judged by people from other socio-economic class, but rather by their own kind, which strengthens this assumption that a certain socio-economic class is actually guilty or is actually has propensity for crime. So therefore, we probably oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we see a problem. Justice done in biased way. We think this is treacherous injustice, and that's the reason why we recognize Firstly, whether by setting diversity, we can ensure a real neutrality on so on. And secondly, bring you whether who is the best actor to judge to decide what is a proportionate punishment or not. Thirdly, before I'm engaged to our previous speaker mentioned before. So Stevenson talked about somehow African forces there's distrust for criminal justice system and so on because they do inside the community etc. Right? However, ladies and gentlemen, we say this is not this is not severe thing etc. This is not severe thing, right? Or because today today is one-sidedly distrusted by poor because the only poor are discriminated, the only poor are excluded by the criminal system because the poor have a very weak point in terms of discussion, in terms of cause, in discussion by juries and so on, right? That's the reason why today, and of course, poor have very bad bias by rich people and so on. That's the reason why poor people are likely to be sentenced in very severe punishment, right? That's the reason why only poor people have to accept that injustices, right, ladies and gentlemen? That's the reason why poor people do not trust, that's the reason poor people accept the forced charges they give up the entire system, right? This is the distrust which Thomas has elaborated. They didn't attack on this point. Secondly, if you compare the trust there is to an African portal, African portal, at least every single defendants are punished proportionately. Because they can be punished without any bias. Ladies and gentlemen, if we compare the two things, their distrust have no impact at all. Every single person have put opportunity to sue or gain or so on, right? However, in our cases, the poor are structure deprive of their dream to be innocent. Therefore, if you compare two things, our side is much severe and which must be rectified. So moving on to the first issue about whether diversity would do matter and so on, right, ladies and gentlemen? So their side has somehow started that neutrality because there's diverse amount of people and because there's possibility to integrate the opinion of from poor background, they can facilitate the discourse and etc. We say this is contradicted with the idea. No, it's not contradicted. Sorry, it is. Sorry, but we say that we told you from Prime Minister that those discourse is not good because the rich people have good knowledge or good skill to persuade the people because they can use very technical words or they can technical words and they can have debating skill and so on. They have literacy. They have more knowledge about to persuade other person. They have poor people, or especially because in context of drug, there's disparity between classes. So poor people are likely to persuade other rich people because the rich people have, they assume they have very small amount of knowledge. Therefore, even if they argue about their lives, if they are persuaded by rich people's diverse amount of knowledge, including the domestic issue and the international issue. Therefore, in this way, the poor people are likely persuaded. That's the reason why, even if there's existence of opportunity to reflect opinion, it's meaningless, ladies and gentlemen. That's the reason why those system is not working, never responded, but to construct speech code. Even if they're rebutted by conquer, it's too late. So, this somehow said that, African forces, evidence that exists, therefore it doesn't matter. This is contradiction for their side of house, because according to their logic, if evidence exists, even African forces, and because there's evidence that exists, no problem, right? Therefore, they're severely contradicted in their senses. Thirdly, the previous speaker somehow said peer pressure exists and so on, right? Peer pressure because because neighbor think that it is not okay. Let's allow. It's not true. The situation is not simple, right? Because even we told you we told you first of all it's much better than the status quo because in that sense there's no parent party, right? They can discuss in a fair way. They can discuss their opinion without any hesitance, right? Therefore we say those discuss will be more facilitated in our paradigm. More secondary, even if such situation occur, the consequence never told by the previous speaker. Thirdly, we say just because they have same background socio-economic, it can't be a reason they did not punish each other, right? Because they don't punish each other. For example, in case of Japan, Japan, like Japanese people are punished by Japanese people, but we are already imposing the same proportional amount of punishment. Why is that? This was illustrated by the talk, right, very effectively, because they know, they hate the crime, they know that crime is bringing harmful for the neighbors, their friends, and so on, right? They know it's very proportionate. That's the reason why we say even if the peer pressure or neighborhood people think this is okay, they can rebut by their own experiences, they can rebut by proportionate knowledge, which was never hindered by their other like outside power. Therefore, it is a very good situation. Before we go to the south, and therefore neutrality does not matter. Go ahead.
So even under our paradigm, we're not rejecting poor people to become Jews. In the first place. Why absolute suppression by the rich happened instead?
Because we told you that, like, you must listen, right? We told you that the poor are not utilized at the status quo. So, second about who's the best people who know about crime and so on, right? So, know about crime. So, like, we told you from continuously that like only those who have the socio-economic people have a more have much better to decide the punishment, because first of all they have no bias, right? No bias at all, because they have the same background, and they know that how their intention of the crime were made out in their paradigm, right? Therefore, that's the reason why we told you that they are much better actor to do that, right? And then that's the reason why we say it is good, complete, good. And this is very important because when you cure the intention of a lot of people, you have to know the background, how is it made by in the past. Therefore, in order to, if you want to know this about issue, like what do you have to think about is like you have to think about juries, and that's the reason why juries by what's here is the principle of logic. Person never doubted by birth figures. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, one clarification before I start my big speech. Actually, Mr. Speaker, this debate can be happened. The United Kingdom 200 or 300 years ago. This debate can happen even in United Kingdom. The most people's perception are already changing for the neutral in the first place, Mr. Speaker. That is why we want to doubt the fundamental concept of their policy. So based on that, I want to talk about three issues. Firstly, I want to destroy or doubt the problem in the status quo. And even if the problem exists, I want to show why this proposal should not be way to go. Secondly, I want to talk about the necessity for jury to be diverse. There is a practical necessity and principle necessity. And thirdly and finally, I want to talk about the harm from outside of the house. Because although Steve gave you lots of material, we have insufficient response from government. On the first issue, problem. The only problem we have from their side of the house is like prosecutor appeal by very biased way, and as a consequence, the heavier sentence given. First reason we have from their side of the house is like intelligent man forced poor to agree their opinion. Our response is like poor have no incentive to listen or agree their opinion in the first place. Why is that? From two reasons. Firstly, there is no reward or salary, even if you listen the voice of the intelligent person in the first place. And more than that, according to their characterization, poor have sympathy in the first place, Mr. Speaker. That is why in these instances, this kind of tragedy never happened. Second reason we have from their side of the house is like intelligent man have preconception when you see the tattoo or crosses or so on and so forth. I don't think the preconception does matter from three levels, because before the trial starts, you are already taught by the judge you have to be neutral. If you have preconception, you be discouraged as a jury in the first place. The second reason is not all jury they might think the all jury, but not all jury have preconception, because under our paradigm in the status quo, there is diversity among the races, among the gender, and so on and so forth. The third reason about the preconception doesn't matter is there is sufficient number of judges. This is a very important point, because even if we consider all jury are biased, as long as we have sufficient number of judges who are professional of legal minded, they don't have any bias in the first place. Then thirdly and finally, the third reason we have from their side of the house is like the old jury or judge from Oxford are biased and so on and so forth. Mr. Speaker, you have to realize, especially judges cannot be biased in the trial, because if you are not the biased judge, you lose the credibility, or you lose the reputation in the society. That is, you lose the job at the instances, Mr. Speaker. That is why the problem from their side of the house never exists. But even if the problem exists, or even if my response is a bit vague, it's not the proposal. They have to take this proposal. Because this proposal is to change the meaning of bias. Yes, we agree, even in the status quo, some bias exists, but they change the meaning of bias for the defendant in the first place, Mr. Speaker. That is why, as long as they never solve the problem anyway, this proposal should not be way to go. So on to the second issue about why or how jury should be diverse. Mr. Speaker, we already gave you a number of analysis. What is the jury in the first place? Jury is the people who have to reflect the citizen view. That because in the trial, we need the both viewpoints of view, the defendant and victim. That is why we need diversity. Response from their side of the house is like, is it a problem about racist or sexist or so on and so forth? Two responses to that. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, as I already clarified, where or when this debate happened, the number of racists or number of sexists is already limited. And secondly, if the number of racists or sexists is so big, they cannot solve the problem at all. Because even if you give the shorter sentence, because you are demonized by the society, because if the number of racists is so big, that is why their response cannot be stand. So why diversity is good from the two aspects? Firstly, we gave you analysis. Diversity leads a fair interpretation. An important point here is we never said we want to reject these people, but what we want to achieve from outside of the house is the fair interpretation or fair discussion in these instances. The second reason that diversity is important is from my second speaker, which is perfectly ignored by government with. But by the way, this is an opportunity for the people to understand what is the real situation of the societal background. For example, if you are rich, without the chance of jury, you have no way or no opportunity to listen the real voice on the ground. Because Steve gave you an example, the media is also biased. This opportunity to listen to the voice is perfectly limited, Mr. Speaker. This is also practically good. We got no response from the side of the high. I want to hear the response from Archie. I want to take it.
So, in a circumstance in which society, say, condones rape, should the jury, like, also condone rape because society condones rape?
No. It's not nuance of our argument. Please listen to our speech. Because we already told you this kind of tragedy never happened. So on the third issue about the harm. Before I start my explanation, you have to realize one thing. The characterization about the poor or the people from the very severe socio-economic background is consensus in this event. Because in order for their benefit can stand, they have the sympathy or they have the more understanding. What is the harm of this proposal? That we gave you a unique analysis from the second speaker by saying because the majority of decision maker can be the jury, they will be pressurized each other, meaning they would actively justify their group or their socio-economic background. That is why the shorter sentence would give it. The social security would be deteriorated. And more than that, for the defendant themselves, this is very harmful. Why is that? Because under their paradigm, the perception of the public never trusts criminal justice. Meaning, even if their benefit can stand, even if we provide the shorter sentence, because they receive the backlash, especially if the victim is from the high class, Mr. Speaker, we cannot enrich their life ever, even if they can get the shorter sentence, because people never rely on the criminal justice. They think this decision making is fraudulent, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy to end my debate life as a champion of JPDU.
Okay, unlike Mr. Korn here, I'm not going to end my debate career yet. Instead, I'm going to end the government's case. We have possibly three things wrong with the government side, right? first thing is about the mischaracterization, utter mischaracterization of the current criminal and government system, right? They talk as if there's an absolute dominance of the rich people. They talk as if there's absolute bigotry, absolute preconception against something, right? Well, two things, ladies and gentlemen. If their case is so bad, they're so bleak and so sad, then education is not going to help them. That even going to Oxford is not going to help your bigotry and so on. Then your country is in great danger. I'm sorry for you. But the fact is that we are assuring you from our speeches that these judges receive proper education. We believe it can somehow help to solving this bigotry and so on in the very first place. The problem of how these people have this discrimination or preconsumption is an utter mischaracterization, considering how capable those judges and the rational the juries are, right? And also they keep talking about the availability of the juries and so on, right? What the hell? I mean, like in the status quo, the jury system exists and it goes fine because we can summon juries from every sort of like a socio-economic background. We can summon them when they're free, when they're not working on Sundays whatsoever. The system works in the status quo, and it is a burden of proof to show that there's an example of how the jury system doesn't work and is actually, biased towards the rich people, which we did not hear from the government, right? Second thing that is wrong from the government is because they are ignorant about the victims or the society's point of view. We have pointed out in our arguments about how the juries are actually representing the society overall, which not only encompasses the defendants but also the victims in the first place, which is why the judgment should be as not biased as possible. And therein lies their third problem, inconsistency and contradiction, right? So our leader of opposition have already told you one very clear thing, that this actually promotes the chance of them getting lighter punishment. They retorted by saying that no, actually the punishment will be heavier. How predictable. But however, we have told you that whether or not the punishment get lighter or heavier is not our burden of proof, nor is it our problem to solve. We're going to show you that the only problem here is because there's a possibility that the juries will be biased against or for the defendant. And that bias is inherently wrong when we're talking about a fair judgment system, something that the government is trying to push forward, right? So we believe that we have found out how the government failed in today's debate. Now there are infinite reasons how the opposition side is awesome, but because we lack the time, I'm just going to give you two probably. The first thing is about the peer pressure, right? We have talked to you, the uniqueness of this plan is because people from the same socio-economic class tend to have sympathy towards each other, not only towards the defendant, but also towards each other. And therefore, the decision making hugely is reliant on the people who are around them. And this argument does not get any engagement whatsoever from the government side. They did not argue. They did not say that this, that this after plan is not going to be biased at all. Rather, when we talk about, on the second level, how we are awesome, is because we talk about whether or not this peer pressure or this best judgment it will happen. Even if disregarding all those factors, we still argue about the backlash argument, which again has no engagement. We have told you, ladies and gentlemen, how these people's perception of how working the criminal justice system is actually quite important to society. Especially when we consider even for the defendant themselves. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if the defendants are really not guilty and they're declared innocent, then we need to see how this declaration of innocence actually weighs in the people's eyes, right? Because if the people see that this person is declared innocent by the fair trial, where nobody is biased for his innocence, then okay, people agree, people understand or trust that he is innocent. But after the plan, when you are, when this person is being acquitted of the crime, is being declared innocent by a group of people who are of their own class, we believe that society is not going to relieve themselves of their suspicion toward this certain defendant, even if he is supposedly not guilty, even if he's supposedly declared innocent. But people will still have this doubt, and people have this bias or discrimination against him. No engagement from the government side. Ultimately, what are they trying to achieve as a government? Are they trying to achieve a fairer judgment of the criminal system? If that is what they're trying to achieve, yes, we agree, but we have already achieved that in the status quo, and we believe it is a fairer way to judge it, especially when we consider that the thing that we should understand is the crime, is the circumstance and the background of crime, and not only the circumstances and the background of the defendant. For all those reasons, we won and we are the champion. Thank you.
You don't win by saying you won, you win by making good arguments, which is what we do on our side of the house. Alright, well, let's get right into it, alright? They give you this principle of representation, that the jury needs to represent the people in the society, because like they say, that's the purpose of the criminal justice system. No, it's not to represent the citizens' views, it's to achieve justice. And if representing equally all the people in society doesn't achieve justice, doesn't achieve proportional justice, then we should stop taking that motion. They never showed you why this achieves more proportional justice. All they said is that the criminal justice system must represent, like, the people in the society, like the jury must represent the people in society. No, the jury must achieve proportional justice for the people on trial. It doesn't matter who it represents. For example, if the society at large, like, kind of agrees with rape culture, as in the case in America, that doesn't mean the jury should reflect the fact that most people condone rape culture, right? It means the jury should achieve proportional justice for the people accused. And in this case, we think if there's an accused rapist, they should go to jail for a long time. Under their model, they want this jury full of people who agree with rape culture, because that's what, like, the electorate thinks, and they're going to let these people off. That's not justice. That's a ridiculous principle from their side of the house. Then they gave us a racist argument when they said that all the black people in the room together are bros who sympathize with the criminals out there in the courtroom. Right? No, black people hate this sort of crime more than anyone. We told you this. It's black people who are killed by black-on-black crime. It's black babies who are shot by, like, collateral damage. It's black houses that are robbed by gang members. Right? Black people want these people in jail more than ever to protect their families, to protect the people they love about. They gave you a racist argument about how these people are all bros together, all in the same gang together, right? We think that's disgusting, and they should lose just for making that sort of argument. I'm disgusted. That's bullshit. Okay? They said, oh, well, the judge can tell you not to be racist. Yeah, that's gonna work. Great argument. Okay, moving on. Okay, they said that judges, like, don't have an incentive to be biased. Okay, if the judge sends a thug to jail, if the judge sends someone in a hoodie with tattoos to jail, no one's gonna say, was he really guilty, right? Because of the systematic bias in the system. Judges don't get suspected for sending people who look like criminals to jail, especially when they now have the word criminal written across their permanent record, right? So that's also a specious argument. Then they talk about backlash. So this makes people resent the system. You know who resents the system? Poor people who are systematically discriminated against by upper-class juries. Those are the people who resent the system. And when you resent the system, you're more likely to commit crime. As Achan told you, you're more likely to commit deviant behavior. That's the backlash we want to ignore. We want people to feel like they've been given real justice. We want people to feel like their community has been treated fairly. And that's how you avoid backlash, right? Furthermore, they said that, like, there's no reason to think that, like, poor people will be swayed by rich people in the juries. First of all, poor people are a minority in any case. So in any given room, a minority, if it's representative, are going to be poor, and the majority are going to be middle class or rich, right? So these people can override the opinions of the poor. Anyways, but moreover, when you've never gone to college and you have a room full of college graduates talking to you about how, oh, this crime was so terrible, and we can see all the many factors involved, and you don't have the will to speak up. You don't have the will to speak out against these people. You don't know the defendant. You might sympathize with them on some level based on, like, your common, like, economic background, but you don't know how to argue against these articulate college-educated people. You can't stand up to their minority opinion, or their majority opinion. Moreover, you can't sway majority opinion when you're poor, because you don't have the articulation to do it. So in the case where it's the majority, like, middle class and wealthy, and a minority poor, the poor can't sway majority opinion the way the rich can. The poor can't speak up against this bias because they don't have the training to, and they don't have the confidence to do that. So we think that point stands as well. So what we told you? We told you that their arguments are ridiculous. You can't win by saying you win. We've shown you how this will lead to better courts, better arguments, and more fairness. And for those of you that are very proud, we will propose the motion.